return once again to the Half-Life universe. Not via Half-Life Alyx, but this time in the form of a remake of Half-Life 1 named Black Mesa from the Crowbar Collective, made from a team of various developers from the Source modding community since the year 2005. Originally released as a mod based on the Orange Box Source engine released in 2012, and then separately as a purchasable product with Valve's blessing in early access in 2016, and now in its final form, content complete on a post-CSGO Source engine in 2020. While I say Black Mesa is a remake of Half-Life 1, that does not mean it is simplistic or unambitious. Far from it. Quite literally every aspect of Half-Life 1 has been recreated and reimagined in Black Mesa. From the dialogue of guards and scientists...
They told me to make sure you headed down there as soon as you got into your hazard suit.
They told me to make sure you headed down there as soon as you got into your hazard suit.
To the combat encounters and levels. Even the music, which is familiar yet different from sound designer Joel Nielsen.
Activated. Atmospheric contaminant sensors activated. Vital sign monitoring activated.
The idea was to take Half-Life 1 as a game whose art and design is reflective of the id Tech-based Gold Source engine it was based on, and expanding upon that with the advances in technology afforded by the Source engine, powering Half-Life 2 and above. So while it follows the beats and structure of how Half-Life levels progress, it can play and look quite differently. Take this example here from the beginning of the game. The BSP nature of Gold Source meant that environmental art like the walls, floors, and elevators in the research facility in the first game had to be hand-carved in the game editor, with a limited complexity so as to run on the computers around 1998. This leads to a very uniquely charming looking game where spaces are simple and sparse, and there are barren and oddly thin spaces and hallways connecting larger rooms. All of this is broken up by rather constant loading. Object size like the size of trash cans and other scenery can seem a bit arbitrary since it was essentially all done by hand in Worldcraft. Going into Black Mesa, you can see in side-by-sides and A to B comparisons that the change from being primarily made of simplistic blocks in BSP into discrete models with a much higher polygon and effects budget has had a profound effect to the game's visual diversity and detail. In many areas where there is just a wall in the original game, the developers have fleshed that area out with lavish detail and then also integrated that back into the story. Take here in the beginning of the game as the guard lets you out into the security lock. In the original, you just cross an invisible loading threshold in the empty room and wait for the door animation to cycle. In Black Mesa, another guard behind a plate of glass talks with you in that same room about the proceedings of the day, and even makes a few jokes at your expense referencing some more obscure Half-Life fandom.
Aw man, you cut the ponytail. Sellout.
Many areas in Black Mesa follow this kind of expansion in design and story afforded by the technological update. Spaces become more to scale and subsequently a bit larger. And then those details are tied back into the story of Half-Life. Were you a bit confused in Half-Life 2 when Dr. Kleiner and Barney acted as if they were your best friends? All I could think was, but which Dr. Kleiner is this Dr. Kleiner? Half-Life 1 as a game of course reused character models and did not have dedicated named characters in the same way as its sequel did, and then kind of retconned back into Half-Life 1.
Whoa, oh my. My goodness.
Black Mesa's developers took the character technology from Half-Life 2 and then expanded on it with the time and effort to add in Dr. Kleiner, Eli Vance, and Barney as dedicated characters with their own dialogue sequences, replacing the more random NPCs of that game. It's pretty remarkable how smartly they are added in, actually. The widening and deepening of design applies to many other aspects of the game beyond the window dressing and story of the intro. In general, due to more elaborate use of shaders and real-time lighting effects, Black Mesa tends to be a bit punchier in its mood. So Half-Life was suitably scary in 1998 after the Resonance Cascade, but Black Mesa is notably darker and relies more on that horror theme due to its use of dynamic lighting, either with the shadows from Gordon's flashlight or the real-time shadow maps that are possible with this version of the Source engine. Gameplay also sees a similar expansion and change. In Half-Life 1, you don't see much enemy engagement before getting the crowbar, which enables your interaction with the world. Source Engine, of course, has material effects and physics, so Black Mesa allows you to dispatch headcrab zombies by lighting them on fire with real-time lighting emergency flares scattered through the environment, before you get the crowbar, which is in a completely different location this time. I think one of the best examples of this expansion of gameplay through the technology offered by Source happens when you find the shotgun. In Half-Life 1, it happens rather unceremoniously with a guard behind a security perimeter. He does not really say much to you, and you just pick up the shotgun there. As you approach him, a zombie comes out from behind, and you shoot your first shotgun shot at a zombie through a fence, most likely. It's not ultra satisfying. Black Mesa has you enter a similar room configuration where the guard is calling to you for help behind a chain link fence, talking to you about how another guard has a head crab on his head. Looming out of the darkness comes his unfortunate colleague. You dispatch him, and he tells you about the extra supplies he has in the back room. There is the shotgun, which has an ultra-satisfying inspection animation, completing with you racking a shell. As you return to that room with the guard, 3 Vortigaunts teleport in, who are much more agile and worthwhile foes, who take quite a lot of pistol shot, but your new ultra-satisfying shotgun allows you to make quick work of them. So it's a similar beat, but with more emphasis on mood setting through an NPC interaction and a different payoff about how you use the shotgun for the first time. It's generally also much harder in terms of combat. In fact, Black Mesa's difficulty and lethality is more similar to Half-Life 1 than it is to Half-Life 2, especially the game's soldiers, who are incredibly lethal, going for flanks, rushing you, and trying to get you from behind cover with liberal grenade usage. It's quite tense. In general, Black Mesa is a fascinating experience for those who have already played Half-Life 1, and it's an excellent introduction into the Half-Life universe for those who have yet to play a Half-Life game. That is impressive considering the very disjointed and near 15-year-long development history of this game. But being a game made by humans, it is of course imperfect in some technical ways due to being a Source Engine game. Loading for one is not eliminated, but it is decidedly less frequent than in the original Half-Life. Another problem is kind of disjointed lighting. While the game is utilizing a more recent version of Source, including shadow maps from the sun and smaller light sources, there can be a disconnect due to the lack of indirect lighting. The game lacks any real-time ambient occlusion. In indoor scenes, this is slightly mitigated by baked lighting mixing with real-time shadow maps. So static objects like this chair in the intro have a real-time shadow map and the baked lighting, grounding it to the floor. Indoor scenes also get around it by faking drop shadows underneath a number of dynamic objects. Basically, fake blob shadows that decrease their size based upon the distance from the floor and the casting object. It is neat to see such an ancient effect in a modern setting, but it is quite obviously fake looking. In outdoor scenes, there does not seem to be any hacky fallbacks like this, so anything not directly lit and shadowed generally looks like it is floating on the ground. Very much so like a Source game, essentially. So here I recommend injecting ambient occlusion as you see fit, either through Reshade in its many forms there, or via the NVIDIA driver. This greatly helps the visuals in all scenarios, indoor and outdoor. Other than that, I did notice 2 other things of concern. The first is the possibility to soft lock your progress in the game. Here in this area, I'm just supposed to go through the door and it closes behind me. But since I accidentally moved backwards through that same door threshold, I soft locked my progress in the game as the door would not open, even though I needed to go through it. It's a bit random, but it happened. Luckily though, a checkpoint save and manual saves make this a non-issue. The last problem though that I encountered is an odd one regarding unique frame reproduction. The game can be nominally running at 60 FPS when you play it, yet the update playback for certain screen elements looks to be 30 FPS. I do think that this is limited to the real-time indoor dynamic shadow maps, which you can see only updating every other frame on the wall here, for example, which gives the game this jittery movement. So if developers can, please unlock the frame rate animation for those screen elements such as shadow maps so that the game does not look framey even though it's running incredibly well. While being on Source means we get these technical downsides, it also means we can basically run this game on anything. Here's Black Mesa running on medium settings at 768p on an 8800 GT and Intel Q6600, basically a PC that came out in 2007. Sure, it is not perfect, but considering this machine is so ancient, that means any PC put together in the last decade will easily find 60 FPS doable. Looking at now older mid-range GPUs running with unlocked frame rates, both the GTX 1060 and RX 580 running at ultra settings and 4K are not enough for a flat 60 FPS, especially in outdoor areas with sun shadows, but dropping the resolution to 1800p or lower, like 1440p, should make that rock solid. And with a resolution like 1080p, that would essentially allow high frame rate gaming at 120 or 144 Hz. Even without the legacy of Half-Life 1 in the background, Black Mesa is an excellent game. Technically, it is dated, of course, in many aspects, but it is a fascinating showcase of how to update a game in a remastering and also expand on that game without losing the original feel. To me, Black Mesa feels authentically Half-Life, and is a must-play in this release state for any fan of the series, or even for those just curious to play a Half-Life game. But that is all from me for now. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you are already a subscriber, then consider hitting that little bell in the corner to be informed as soon as Digital Foundry posts a video. If you want to see this comparison in the highest quality available, support us on Patreon. If you want to talk to me about the amazing Black Mesa, write a comment below or follow me and Digital Foundry on Twitter. And as always, this is Alyx, bidding you farewell und auf Wiedersehen.